Welcome to another English Solutions for Business and Life video. Today, we will be looking at the Global Intermediate Book, Unit 2, and we will be focusing on the vocabulary section. In the vocabulary section, we will see a couple of things. Firstly, let's look at ing and ed adjectives. Also, we will look at relationship words, phrases, extreme adjectives, and prepositions. So let's begin. First, ing and ed adjectives. There are some adjectives that can be applied to people or objects and feelings. But even though they have the same root of a word, they are written or they would be different if you're talking about people or things than talking about feelings. Let's look at some examples. First, to describe people or things, we could use the words amazing or boring. For example, a place could be amazing, such as a theme park, and a place could be boring. For example, if you don't like museums, you could think museums are boring. But you could also use adjectives to express your feelings towards these things. Those words would be different, those adjectives would be different, and they would end in ed. As you noticed, when adjectives describe things or people, they end in ing, amazing or boring. When they describe feelings, you end it in ed, amazed and bored. For example, when you go to a theme park, an amazing theme park, you could be amazed by the different attractions. And if you don't like the museum and you go to the museum, you might get bored. That's a feeling, and it's also an adjective. You're bored. I'm bored. I'm amazed. Now, there are lots of different words that follow this rule. For example, fascinating, confused, inspiring, shocked, embarrassing, disappointed. Those are a couple of words in each of these different groups. But if we follow the rule and turn these adjectives into the other type of adjective, for example, those that describe people, if we turn them into words that describe feelings, we would just change the end. These that are underlined. Fascinating would then be turned into fascinated. You could look at something fascinating and be fascinated by it. If you're confused, it might be because you read or looked at something confusing. If you see something inspiring, you might be inspired. You might get shocked if you see something shocking. And if you're doing something embarrassing, you might feel embarrassed by it. If you feel disappointed, it might be because someone or something was disappointing. I hope you understand the differences between these different adjectives. And as you can see, they are used differently when talking about people or things, and feelings. Now let's look at the next part, relationships. In this part, we will look at a couple of words and see the differences between these words for relationships. For example, grandfather and great-grandfather. Your grandfather is your father's father, while your great-grandfather would be your grandfather's father. You could also add another great before great-grandfather to talk about your great-grandfather's father, and so on and so forth. Now let's look at another word, or another couple of words. Friend and acquaintance. A friend is someone who you like to hang out with, you like to speak or talk a lot with, and you might share some secrets and some personal information with your friend. An acquaintance is not as close. You might know someone, you might know their names, you might actually even work with that person, but you're not willing to share your personal information with that person. Or just you don't like to hang out with that person that much. That would be an acquaintance. Now, let's look at another couple of words. Colleague and boss. A colleague is someone who you work with, someone who might do the same activities that you do in your company, in your job, while a boss would be someone who you work for. And everything that you do will be checked by your boss. You could also look at it thinking that your boss would be the one who would pay you, but not all of the time. It depends on what your job is. You could also be the boss of someone, and you would pay those people. Now, let's look at another couple of words. Fiancé and ex-wife. A fiancé, or your fiancé, would be your girlfriend or boyfriend once you're already making a commitment to get married. Once you have already proposed to that person, that special person, he or she would turn into your fiancé. You're expecting to get married with that person. Your ex-wife would be someone that was previously married to you, and specifically talking about a wife or a woman, but is no longer your wife. Could be because that person, you were divorced, or that person passed away. She would still be your ex-wife, even though you're no longer married to that person. It's the same. The same applies to husband. Your ex-husband would be the man you were previously married to, but you're no longer married to that person, if that were to be the case. Now let's look at another couple of words. Stepbrother and half-brother. This one might be a little bit more difficult. A stepbrother would be the son, specifically talking about the son, stepbrother. You could also say stepsister. And they would be the children of a person that your mother or father has married, but they're not really your siblings. They're not blood related. So, in other words, you might have a family, and thinking about maybe your mother and father, they had children. Those would be your brother and sister, or sister. Now, if one of them passes away or they get divorced and one of your parents gets married again, the children of the new member of your family, could be your stepmother or your stepsister, stepfather, would be your stepbrother or stepsister. Now, it's different to half brother because a stepbrother would be someone who was already born before your mother or father got married, while your half brother would be someone who was born after your mother or father got married again. Following that logic, your stepbrother would have no blood relationship with you, but your half brother is half related to you. Okay, I hope you can understand these words better and can differentiate between these types of relationships with other people. Now let's look at the next part. Phrases. There are a couple of phrases in this unit that might be useful for you when speaking. Let's look at them. Firstly, have a lot in common. You could say you have a lot in common with someone who maybe does something or likes something or even looks like you. Having a lot in common means that there are many things, a lot, that you share with that person or in common. The phrase pretty much describes itself, but think about it like that. You have many things that you share with that person. It could be likes, it could be physical appearance, or other things. Now let's look at another phrase. Get on quite well. This means that you get along or you normally don't argue with someone. If you get on quite well with your parents, that means that you don't argue with them, you don't fight, and you pretty much are always happy with your parents. And they are always happy with you. You don't have many problems with them. Now, let's look at another phrase. Put up with. To put up with someone or put up with something means that you have to tolerate something even though you don't like it or you don't like that person. If you put up with your little siblings, if you happen to have some, that means that you tolerate them even though they might have bad behavior. It could be your siblings, it could be your students, it could be some other person in your job, your colleagues, for example. Put up with means to tolerate. Now, fall out with would be probably the opposite of putting up with. Fall out with means that you argue or you stop talking to someone. You cannot tolerate that person, and so you lose most contact with that person. Fall out compared to put up. Put up means to tolerate, and to fall out means to stop tolerating someone. You could maybe, for example, if you want a phrase, you could fall out with your boss, and thus you might stop working in the company that you might be working at, which is not recommended, but it depends on the situation. Now, let's look at another phrase. Keep in touch and lose touch. Here, we're not talking about physical contact with someone. Keep in touch means that you have the contact or you talk with constantly. You might send an email constantly to someone. For example, you might keep in touch with a friend that you previously had in another job or maybe during your school days, and you still talk to that person even though you do not see that person constantly. Maybe that person traveled overseas and you still call them, you still text them, you still talk with them over the internet. While lose touch would be the opposite. You keep in touch means you continue talking to that person, but lose touch would be to stop talking to that person. Either that person can no longer talk with you, maybe that person is too busy, so you lose touch with that person. You do not contact that person as often as you would like, or as often as you used to keep in touch with that person. Now let's look at the next part. I hope you understood these phrases, and if you have any more questions, you could also ask your teacher about them. Now, let's look at extreme adjectives. This is a rather, interesting part. If you want to be a good English speaker, you might want to investigate and look for extreme adjectives because it's easy to talk about adjectives, and when you're saying an extreme adjective, you could use very. Very big, very happy, very sad, very angry, very bad, very old, very surprised, very dirty, very tired. Those are not necessarily incorrect. Very big, well, you could think about something big and you could think about something bigger, which would make it something very big. The same goes with all of these different adjectives. But if you want to maybe surprise someone with your English ability, or you want to speak better English, you might want to learn extreme adjectives. For very big would also be enormous. Very happy would be delighted. Very sad, if you're very sad, you could use the word miserable. It's not necessarily a bad word in English, it just means that you're very sad, very disappointed. Now, very angry, you could be furious. If something's very bad, it could be terrible. If something's very old, it might be ancient. If someone's very surprised, that person could be astonished. If something's very dirty, you could say that it's filthy. And if someone is very tired, you could say that person is exhausted. Those are just a couple of examples, but if you want some more, you could investigate, you could look at some dictionaries, some textbooks, or even in the internet. Try to look for extreme adjectives and increase your vocabulary. Lastly, let's look at prepositions. We have already seen, or you might have already seen, a couple of prepositions, quite a lot of prepositions actually. Let's add some more words to that vocabulary list. For example, above. Above would be similar to over. It could be something that is over the word. For example, here, the red ball is above the words. Now, against means that something is on something else. Here, the red stick is against the word, or in this case, the letter T, as you can see in this drawing. Against. It's lying down on that thing, but it's not horizontally lying down. That could be a good reference for you to remember that word. Now, let's look at beside. Beside means that is on the side of something. Here, the red ball is beside the word. Around. Around could be something fixed. It doesn't have to be moving. For example, here in this case, the red ring is around the word. Beneath means under. And here, the red stick is under the word, or beneath the word. beyond. Here it's, let me explain, the green square is beside the word beyond, and the red ball is beyond the red square. It's not necessarily behind, it just means that it's farther away than the green square. Now, let's look at the last word. It's within. Within means that it's in between or inside something. Here there are a couple of red dots within the word within. So these are some examples of the words that we saw during this unit. I hope you understand, and if you have any more questions about these words, make sure you ask your teacher about them. Sorry if this video is a little long. It had a lot of things to cover, but I hope it has helped you and hope you liked it. And we will see you on the next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.